All right. Welcome to 24 Hours Have Passed, the evolution of the data platform. We're excited you could join us here today for Riccardo, Muti, and Chris Finlan session, SQL Server 2016 Reporting Services and Mobile BI. This past 2004, my goodness, I'm a little frazzled. We started not on time earlier. This 24 Hours Have Passed event consists of 24 consecutive live webcasts delivered by expert speakers from the past community. Sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. To access any on-demand sessions, please visit www.24hoursofpast.com for all session links. My name is Davidson. I'm a data architect, and I've written a few books on database design, and honestly, almost every database looks exactly alike until you have some sort of cool front end on it that can get some data out to the users, and that's what we're here for. These guys are going to show us some great stuff. We have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Riccardo and Chris. Going to the next slide. If you require any technical assistance, please type your questions into the question pane. Look at it on the right side of your screen and someone will assist you. The question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. I'll queue those up for answering at the end of the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time and that'll be taken care of. So you're able to zoom in on the presentation by using the zoom button located at the top of the presentation window. Please note there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. Please fill that out. Your feedback is very important to the speakers and the organizers so they can get a feel for how well this has worked out for you. Go to the next slide, please. Sorry. Next, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsors, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Hortonworks, and Redgate. In addition to the supporting sponsors, Hewlett-Packard, SQL Century, and SanDisk are also, in addition, these are the supporting sponsors, sorry, Hewlett-Packard, SQL Century, and SanDisk. These 24 Hours Have Passed would not be possible without their generous support, and they're the reason this event is available free of charge for you today. The next slide. Make sure you explore everything else PASS has to offer as an offer for us data professionals. You can join local user groups around the world, online virtual chapters. They have free online resources in their learning center. They have a great newsletter that comes out very often, the Connector newsletter. So there's just tons of stuff that PASS has their hands in. It's a really great organization. I've been around it for 15 years, and it's just fantastic. So now let me introduce our speakers. Next slide. We have Christopher Finlan. Chris is a leading evangelist for business intelligence with Microsoft since 2013 as the lead business intelligence technology solution professional in the Mid-Atlantic region. He was responsible for helping over 140 enterprise customers align their specific requirements to the Microsoft Cloud and Data Platform. His unique presentation style and background in shadow IT has made him a highly sought-after speaker for customer presentations and allows him a unique perspective on a variety of BI-related topics and trends. Chris is a senior program manager on the reporting services team and has been working in the software industry for over a decade in various roles, from technical training, database administrating, and sales. Next up, we'll introduce Riccardo Muti. Riccardo is a senior program manager at Microsoft, specializing in business intelligence and currently focusing on reporting services. Previously, he worked on the core aspects of Power BI and the evolution of Power View into Power BI reports. Earlier still, he worked on Power View in SQL Server 2012. Riccardo is a regular speaker at conferences including the PASS Summit, PASS Business Analytics Conference, and at TechEd. So with that I will turn it over and let Chris and Riccardo give us their stuff.
Great, thank you very much. This is Riccardo speaking. I have Chris here with me, and you'll be helping me with part of the presentation. Chris has a lot of background on DataZen Mobile BI and the mobile BI technology that is now integrated into the reporting services, and so he'll help us highlight the new mobile BI capabilities of 2016 reporting services. So what we thought we'd do today is we'd give you a little bit of an update on the long-term vision and roadmap, of which we have made some good progress in SQL 2016, but it gives you the bigger picture of where we are headed beyond SQL 2016. And then we'll turn our attention more short-term to what is available today now with SQL Server 2016, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is going to be generally available on June 1st, so less than a week away now. And then we have a couple of demos for you to showcase some of the new functionality that we'll talk about. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end, 5-10 minutes or so, for questions. I think as has been mentioned, you can just type in your questions and they'll be queued up, and then at the end we'll get to as many as we can, and any that we don't get to, we can follow up with the answers for those. So with that, that longer-term vision roadmap that I mentioned, for anybody who has not seen some variation of this slide yet, this is showing where we're going with reporting and how we reconcile all these different report types that we have that have their different scenarios that they focus on, their different strengths, as well as the delivery vehicles that we have for publishing these reports, sharing them with your organization. We now have Power BI as a service in the cloud, and we've got reporting services as a server that you can deploy and manage on-premises in your own environment. And then there are different ways that users these days are consuming that content. It might be going through the web browser on a PC, but it might be these days on a mobile device, or it might be embedded in another application. So the message to take away from this really is that there are these multiple report types. The two ones at the top are aimed more at self-service BI and free-form analytics. So traditionally that's been Excel. You go and connect to a cube, or you connect to some data, you pull it in, and you use pivot tables, and you analyze the data, kind of explore it, and potentially end up creating a report in the format of an Excel spreadsheet with pivot tables. A modern alternative to that that doesn't replace Excel but kind of complements Excel and is more focused in its purpose is Power BI Desktop, which evolved from Power View, which was a self-service data visualization technology. You now have it all packaged up with Power Query and Power Pivot and all of that data preparation and data modeling side of it into one package in Power BI Desktop. It's a freely downloadable application, and you can explore data and then go and create these really beautiful interactive reports. Both of those things today you can publish to Power BI in the cloud, but in the case of Excel, to publish those on premises, you really need a somewhat complex heavyweight environment involving SharePoint Enterprise, Excel services. There isn't a lightweight server that you can go and deploy to get that working. And for Power BI Desktop reports, unfortunately, you really have no solution. You need to be able to publish those to Power BI in the cloud, which some organizations would prefer an on-premises option, and there is no on-premises option today. With reporting services reports, you can build these reports in Visual Studio. If you're a developer, you can take advantage of source control, projects, Visual Studio build and deployment, and all that sort of application lifecycle management stuff. Or if you're a non-developer, you can have a bit of a simpler experience to create these reports in Report Builder, which is a more standalone, simplified application. But you build these reports and you really have to publish them to an on-prem server. There isn't a cloud option, and we're hearing more and more customers looking to move their applications to the cloud and potentially get out of the business of running the hardware, patching the operating system, patching the server, and so on. So there's interest on sides in these things being available, whether you're a cloud customer or an on-prem customer. And so the roadmap is just to do that, to support these core set of report types both in the Power BI Cloud service and in reporting services on premises. And then you should be able to view them on a mobile device, on a PC, in your web browser, any modern web browser, or embedded in other applications. Step one of this really was we lacked a mobile BI story on premises, and so what we did was we acquired a company called Davidson about a year ago, and here we are just 1 year later, and we have fully integrated that Davidson technology into reporting services. So there is no separate server to deploy, there is no separate set of mobile apps to manage. You just deploy SQL 2016 reporting services, and we have Davidson integrated as this mobile reports functionality, and you can view it in Power BI Mobile on your mobile device or just in a mobile browser. That's step one. Step number two was to modernize self-service BI and make that available on premises as well. Our plan to do that is to take Power BI desktop reports and make it possible to publish those as an alternative to publishing them to the Power BI Cloud service, to publish them to reporting services, report server on-prem, and then be able to view them in a browser. You might notice that you can actually take Power BI desktop reports today and upload them to reporting services, and you can manage permissions, who can see them, who can download them, that kind of thing in the web portal. But when you click them, they open up still in Power BI desktop, so you need to have that installed. The next logical step for us is to be able to click those files in the reporting services and just have them open up in the browser. So that's where we're heading in terms of our roadmap. So with that said, let's look at what we did more short-term and is shipping now in SQL 2016 reporting services. We'd like you to think about reporting services in 2016 as a modern on-premises solution for deploying reports in your organization and managing them. You can create two different types of reports now. You can create the traditional paginated document style of report, what you would traditionally always think about as a reporting services report. And it's a lot easier to make beautifully modern looking versions of those reports. The tools are updated, they got new features, and they got new styles for the visualizations. And then we've added a new report type, which is these mobile reports based on the Davidson technology. The contrast between them is whereas the paginated reports are designed for that traditional requirement of I'm going to design it once and then no matter what device, screen, resolution, browser, whatever anybody is using, the report's always going to be laid out exactly like this, pixel by pixel. Whereas the mobile reports are designed to support these very different screen shapes, sizes, orientations, and so they have a responsive layout that as you view it on a phone it looks one way, you view it on a tablet it looks a different way. Even as you turn your phone between portrait and landscape orientation, things move around to make the best use of the screen. Both of these report types are available in this new modern web portal, so if you're used to using the classic report manager web portal in reporting services, that's been replaced by a new modern looking web portal and one that works in modern browsers that people are using. So I mentioned that we modernized the paginated reports. A bit of a quick drill down to how we did that. All of the chart and gauge styles that you're used to, they have been replaced with modern looking styles that align very nicely with those ones in Power BI. So the color palette is the same. A lot of the styling is a more modern minimalistic styling. And of course you still have all the power that you had before to customize very fine-grained elements of these visuals as much as you like. There are two new chart types in tree maps and sunburst charts. Those are useful for visualizing hierarchical information. If you're using Report Builder, the simplified version of our design tools, you'll find that it's got an updated version of that with a modern look and feel. Whereas if you're using Visual Studio, you can now use Visual Studio 2015, which developers have been asking for a while. Even as you're an end user consuming these reports, like in a web browser, you'll find lots of modernizations from the way that the reports render to everything to things like printing. When you used to print a report before, it used to require that you installed an ActiveX control, and that didn't work in browsers besides Internet Explorer. Now you have a simpler plug-and-free experience that works cross-browser. Just to give you a quick example about some of those styles that we updated, hopefully this is the last time we'll ever have to look at them in a presentation like this, but if you created a report and you created a chart and used the wizard, it would give you a choice of a number of what now look like very dated styles, and we've added some really retro PowerPoint animations here just to emphasize the point. You had the ocean theme. If you didn't like that, you could get the forest theme. If you needed something that aligned with your corporate style guide, you'd be in luck because you would get the universal standard corporate theme. And finally, my personal favorite, possibly our personal favorite, the rich mahogany theme. So these themes have had their time in the sun. They've been around for probably about a decade or so. We have now replaced them with modern looking themes that we'll show you in our demo. Beyond the report content itself, I think one of the main pieces of customer feedback that we got, actually the #1 customer complaint that we got about report parameters was that I have all this control over the layout of things in the report itself, but when it comes to that parameters pane at the top, I really have little to no control over it. I can control the ordering of the parameters, what order I want them to appear, but reporting services would just kind of dictate that they would be laid out left to right, top to bottom, across this two-column layout. And that two-column layout made sense when screens had a resolution like 800 by 600, but these days with a modern wide screen, you're wasting a lot of vertical screen real estate, and you have a lot of horizontal screen real estate that you're not able to take advantage of. So the way to think about this is you no longer have control over the ordering of the parameters. We've just given you direct control of the position of each parameter. Position each one exactly where you want it to be. You can position them across more than 2 columns, and you have a design time experience to just drag and drop the parameters where you want them. You've probably been used to having export to Excel and export to Word and a number of other formats like PDF and reporting services. You now have export to PowerPoint as an option. And this is just a really convenient way. We saw a lot of users who would be doing screen clippings of reporting services reports to get elements from it into their PowerPoint presentation. And then they would do all sorts of formatting and additional tweaks in their PowerPoint presentation. This just gives a lot quicker one-click way to get all of the content in your report in one click into a PowerPoint format effectively. All of the charts and gauges and maps and visuals like that become images that you can format and move around in your PowerPoint presentation. And top-level heading text boxes in your report, they actually become editable PowerPoint text boxes, so you can change the text or change the font and so on. Just like any other PowerPoint export format, reporting services export format, you can do the export manually, but of course you can also schedule it, so you can get a PowerPoint presentation in your inbox or in a file share on a regular basis, or you can integrate it into your application by programmatically generating these presentations. And then an interesting hybrid scenario, if you're a customer who's using a bit of the cloud and a bit of on-prem, and you're starting to use Power BI dashboards as another way besides, say, email to monitor data and monitor important business metrics and trends, you can start to take existing charts and gauges and maps from your reporting services reports on-prem, leave them where they are, don't have to rebuild the reports, don't have to migrate the reports to the cloud or anything like that, and just pin these individual charts to your Power BI dashboards. And reporting services based on a subscription in the background will process the data on hourly, daily, weekly, whatever you decide, and regenerate those charts and push them up to your Power BI dashboard so that they're always up to date in terms of the data that they're showing. And then let me hand it over to Chris for a moment to talk about mobile reports.
Okay, thanks, Riccardo. So with the acquisition of Davidson a little over a year ago, one of the things that we were looking to do for customers is provide an on-prem mobile solution that was integrated with their existing Microsoft investment. So adding that to reporting services made a lot of sense in terms of adding this new report type as we build out this vision as we move forward for the different report types that Riccardo outlined earlier. So if you're not familiar with the Davidson technology, one of the things that we found when even pre-acquisition and then after we started showing this new technology to customers is they loved the way that you could design and publish these reports. It was very, very simple to get started quickly with a visual first approach where you could drag and drop from a list of gallery elements, put it onto your canvas, have it prototyped with some simulated data, and immediately see a preview of exactly what that look and feel would look like on different form factors. So you can customize the layout for both tablets and for phones and for a traditional desktop view. Again, thinking of a mobile optimized experience, whether you're in the browser and the native app support that I'll talk about in a moment, you're going to have this view that's optimized for that particular layout, so you no longer are seeing a report in certain solutions previously where you potentially would have seen a non-optimized view of that on your phone where it's either been resized improperly or you're missing certain data. That's something that the Davidson technology really does a great job of working with. And when you talk about the existing infrastructure that you have with reporting services, the concepts of shared data sources and shared data sets are something we were able to quickly take advantage of and use that for your mobile optimized reports and for the KPI elements, which I'll talk about a little bit on the next slide. So you have this single repository of data that will power both of these items. So with this, we also took the standalone data app and added that functionality into the Power BI mobile app. So actually today, with the most recent update for iOS, we now have all of the functionality available now across all three platforms, iOS, Android, and Windows 10 came out last week, where you now have the ability to connect to both your Power BI data and your reporting services data through a single app. So whether you want to go to the cloud, whether you want to use our on-premises solution, you now have a single app across all those platforms to now access and work with your data. It's been set up so you can use that offline or online. So if you happen to go offline and you're using the native app, you'll still have full access to the information that's been cached in the device and have your ability to interact with it accordingly. That was something that was very, very important for our end users as we worked with this. And again, you'll be able to schedule the data refresh for this both on the server by using the shared data set functionality, and with the offline device, we have the concept of favorites, where you can add favorites. Favorite mobile reports, favorite KPIs, and you can actually see them on your device, and they'll always be getting the latest information on a sync schedule that happens every few minutes. So it's been optimized for that experience where you have something that you can use on your phone and tablet on the go or on or at your desk, in fact. Next, is there another slide on this? Yeah. So I know Riccardo's going to cover the web portal here in a moment, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the KPIs in that context. So with the KPIs, this is another thing that was brought over from the Davidson technology. These are the most important metrics for your business and something that your executives or users want to see at a glance very quickly. How are we doing? Are we in the red? Are we in the green? And we found as we talked to customers more and more about this that it ended up being, potentially some of the highest people in the company were most interested in looking at the KPIs. I often tell the story of I was talking to a customer and they said their CEO wanted to see their KPIs while brushing their teeth. And so this was a way where they very quickly could see the KPIs on a phone, see how their business was doing at a glance, and have that available now through this brand new modern web portal and through the native apps, as I mentioned before, on all these different devices. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Riccardo so he can tell you a little more about the new modern web portal.
Thanks. Yeah, so if you've used reporting services before in recent releases and in recent years, as I mentioned earlier, you've got this report manager web portal. I think aesthetically in terms of design it was due for a refresh, but actually the more impactful issue that customers were hitting was that that web portal is based on a code base that fundamentally was just designed really over a decade ago for what was the dominant browser at the time, and that was the time of the IE and Netscape browser wars. And so really it was designed for IE5 as the browser that most of our customers used. And of course, browsers have evolved, the web has moved on, web standards have taken hold, and really websites aren't designed for IE5 and all of its quirks now. They're designed for modern HTML5 web standards. And so as people used modern browsers, whether they're our own browsers, even in Internet Explorer 11 and more recently in Windows 10 with Edge, that have dropped a lot of that legacy support, Report Manager didn't really work properly. And the problem only got worse when customers were using alternative browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. So the web portal itself just was not tenable for us to maintain going forward and have it be optimized in terms of the experience across all of these modern browsers. Also the reports themselves, the engine that converts your existing reporting services reports, the data output that we get from them translates that output into HTML. Again, fundamentally was designed to output HTML that worked well in IE5 and all of that particular browser version's quirks. Today it doesn't output the standards-based HTML5 markup that a modern browser needs to show your report effectively and correctly. So we actually, there's a lot of work under the hood here. The message that I would say is to not mistake this for a mere facelift of Report Manager. The HTML rendering engine underneath was actually forked and largely rewritten so that your existing reports now output standards-based HTML5, and that means that the report looks correct based on how you designed it. You'll see more consistency between the report that you see in the browser and the report that you saw in the design tools. And you'll also see a lot more consistency in the report across different browsers that users might be using. And that includes, again, Internet Explorer 10 and 11, which have 10 and up are really the ones that have proper HTML5 support, and then Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. I think Chris can speak to this one.
Yeah, so the branding piece was something that was also part of the Davidson acquisition, and it was a very popular feature which allowed people to have their company's logo and brand colors available in both in the native apps and in the portal experience that was provided. So with the addition of this to reporting services in 2016, we added this in a way that's actually far easier and more elegant to add this type of functionality to your reporting services portal than was previously in Davidson. In Davidson, it was very, very heavy-duty CSS process that you had to go through and update. You had to provide different images for all the different device types. It was a very, very difficult process for many people to kind of manage on their own. With the introduction of this in 2016, there's actually been I put together a blog post on the Reporting Services team blog. There's been some other, I think, third parties that have done some posts around this. It's a very simple form that you just simply update with the different colors you'd like. You use the 6-digit color scheme that many people are familiar with. You update that for different parts of your portal, and then you upload the file, and then you now have this brand new color scheme applied along with a logo or an icon image if you choose to bring that as well. You can see here we've done the Xbox theme. We've actually provided a couple sample themes on the blog post as well, which you can use that have the demo color scheme along with one that has different colors for each element. It makes it very easy for you to kind of tweak and update to your particular needs. You can resave it as your own file and then apply that to your portal accordingly. And it's a great way for people to kind of personalize the experience for their end users.
Yeah, and I think the end result that we ended up with in terms of how easy it is to create one of these things is hard to overstate. It's been nice to see that as we've released this, we've had people tweeting, hey, I just took a first look at this branding functionality today, and I was able to create my first branding package with my corporate logo and my corporate colors, and they tweeted out a picture of it and looked really, really slick. So I would encourage everyone on the call here to do the same thing. It's a nice little project that doesn't take more than a day from what we've seen. And go and try it. Learn about it, read the blog post, and try it with your corporate logo and corporate colors. And if you like what you see, feel free to tweet it with the hashtag SSRS, and that ensures that we'll get a chance to look at what you've created with the product, which is always nice to see. I think I mentioned this one earlier, is that we're starting to take incremental steps here toward hosting additional types of content and additional types of reports in reporting services. You've always had actually some ability to host arbitrary files in reporting services and manage security on them. You know, if you have somebody mentioned the other day, if you have a Word doc that's a data dictionary that describes what some of the you know, different elements of data might mean, how they're calculated, some background information on them, you can put that Word doc in reporting services as well and enable users who have access to go and download it. And what we've done here is just optimize for a couple of the report types where we'd like to surface more in reporting services over the next period. And those are Power BI desktop reports primarily, and also Excel workbooks in our roadmap vision. As I mentioned, right now you click on a Power BI desktop report, it opens up in Power BI desktop. The next step that we're actually started working on already is surfacing it so that in a future update, you'll click on one of these Power BI desktop reports, and it will just open up in the web browser. So you don't necessarily need Power BI Desktop installed to just be a consumer of that content. Another interesting one that we were able to squeeze in for the GA release of SQL 2016 was the ability to connect reporting services to an SMTP server, a mail server that requires authentication. So previously, reporting services didn't work with any SMTP server that required authentication, which pretty much meant these days that it didn't work with any SMTP server. So, you know, Exchange Server, Exchange Online, Gmail, any of these services, they all, of course, require authentication today. So what people were forced to do was set up the IIS-6 SMTP server just as kind of a relay to their real email server. And so it was just a bunch of extra stuff that you had to set up that just to get email delivery coming out of your reporting services report server. And the IIS-6 SMTP server has now been deprecated for a while, so it's really a feature we wanted to break the dependency on that and make it a lot easier for customers to set it up. So now you can just configure your actual corporate email server. In our case, we're looking at Exchange Online here, and just put in the username and password that you need to authenticate to that email server, and you are good to go. No need for the IIS SMTP server anymore. And another one worth calling out is that we have in reporting services support for third-party data sources. You of course have ODBC and OLADB connectivity to whatever data source you can get a driver for, but we have native connectors that provide a little bit of a richer experience for certain common enterprise data sources, and they're listed here. Previous versions of reporting services didn't work very well with some of those. For example, the previous releases of reporting services only worked with SAP BW 3.5 and earlier. And of course, not many people are using 3.5 anymore. They're all using 7 point something. And so now reporting services works with SAP BW 7.0 through 7.5. And a similar sort of thing happened for the other data sources. One thing to watch out for, and just to make sure, in case you are using reporting services and find that some of these data sources aren't showing up in the drop-down list, the usual reason is that you don't have the right driver installed. So on the client side, it's often 32-bit tools like Visual Studio. You'll need to have the 32-bit version of the driver installed. On the server side, it's usually a 64-bit server, so you'll want the 64-bit version of the driver installed. With Oracle in particular, though, there's a number of different drivers they often offer. Since reporting services is based on .NET, the one you're going to want is the Oracle Data Provider for .NET, or ODP.NET. So some things to watch out for, but the good news is that you can connect to the versions of these third-party data sources that you are probably using. And finally, just to wrap it up, another little customer delighter feature for some of our enterprise customers is the ability to provide a token in a connection string that will be replaced at runtime with the username of the user viewing the report. So the scenario often is that I have a SharePoint-based environment or maybe just a reporting services environment where I've customized the authentication, and the users who are signing into SharePoint or to reporting services are not actually users in my organization. They're not users in my Active Directory at all. So they're not Windows users. And that presents a problem when you want to connect to something like SQL analysis services and filter different users, because analysis services requires that the user be a user in Active Directory. And when it sees these users from SharePoint or from reporting services who aren't in Active Directory, it doesn't know who they are, and it doesn't understand their identity and how to filter different data for them. So one of the ways that you can work around that now is you can just pass this user ID token in your custom data property, and then in analysis services you can use the custom data function to get the value of that username, and now you can supply your own logic to do whatever you want based on that username, and it doesn't have to be a user in Active Directory. So it is not a security feature in and of itself, but it's just a way of flowing through the username so that in your trusted subsystem sort of environment you can do what you choose with that username. And with that, we will turn to a quick demo. So we'll start with the consumption of reports, what an end user would see in terms of their experience with reporting services. I'm using Chrome here just to prove the point that our new experience works across modern browsers, Microsoft's and third-party. And this is the classic report manager that you might be used to. In this particular instance, I don't have that much content. We have a dog food environment internally that I'd like to say to people includes upwards of 17,000 reports, and the root level contains over 100 folders. So with the way the content is organized, it's not really grouped by different types. You just see a lot of folders, a lot of content, and it's a little bit of a, it contains a lot of things that really aren't something that I use every day. It's used by a large organization, thousands of people. And so it's in terms of aesthetics and also just in terms of providing a personal experience, it was definitely due for an overhaul. So with that, I'll switch over, and this is the modernized, completely rewritten web portal that you can expect from SQL 2016 reporting services. You'll see that, of course, it's a lot more modern looking. It's a pure HTML5 single-page web app. It organizes the content into different types of content, from folders into which I can drill down and navigate the folder hierarchy, to my KPIs, always floated up to the top, as Chris said, top of mind for an executive or somebody who's just trying to get a pulse on how the business is doing, and then drilling further and further into the details with these mobile optimized reports that are interactive, as well as my traditional reporting services reports, and finally any other files that I upload or building blocks like data sets and data sources. So here actually the other thing to note is that an end user who sees a large folder hierarchy of lots of different types of content, again it might be for other teams in the organization that aren't really relevant to me, I can start to narrow down on what's relevant to me by right-clicking here or opening up the menu and adding things to my favorites or removing them from my favorites. And what will happen is then I will accumulate favorites, and when I go to reporting services from now on, as long as I have favorites, this is actually where I'll go by default and what I'll tend to see day to day. So really for the first time ever, reporting services is now a personalized experience for each user. I come in every day and I see the KPIs that matter to me and the reports that I tend to use on a regular basis. I can still go and access all of the content by going to Browse and seeing the full folder hierarchy. But that's an important feature to call out. Let's open up a traditional reporting services report here. You notice it renders really quickly. It renders beautifully here in Chrome, just as I designed it. And it's a really modern looking report. I mean, design is subjective and one could argue whether a particular visual is beautiful or not, but I think everybody tends to agree that this is a lot more of a modern look and feel than people expect and have been used to from reporting services in years past. So we've done a lot of work to overhaul what the visuals look like with a lot less effort on your part. And beyond the aesthetics here, I can do things like I can print. So We mentioned that before, printing was based on ActiveX, so what you would see in any browser besides IE that doesn't support ActiveX, you wouldn't even see the print button, so you couldn't print. And even if you Internet Explorer and could see this, what would happen when you click this button is it would ask you to install this ActiveX plugin. And in many organizations, especially many enterprises, end users don't have those permissions. They're not admins on their machine, and they can't install that plugin. And so it was a challenge for enterprises to push out and deploy that plugin and deploy updates to that plugin. So now we use a more modern approach. I click this. It's going to show me the default page size and orientation as designed in the report, but I can override it if I want. And then I'll just click print, and it's using a PDF-based approach. It generates a PDF and then relies on the fact that many of the modern browsers have native PDF viewing and printing capabilities built in. So the other nice part about that, besides the fact that there's no plugin deployment, besides the fact that it works cross-browser, is we get a better print preview experience because you're getting the native Chrome print preview experience, which I would argue is better than anything we ever had custom built in reporting services. So you get a beautiful print preview experience, and you can print from any modern browser. The other thing I'll show while I'm here is export. I mentioned there's a new export format that shows up here in PowerPoint, so I can export to PowerPoint. And I'll open that up. And really quickly, I've got a PowerPoint presentation generated with all of the content in my report. And then you can do all the typical PowerPoint stuff. So I can go and change the theme here. I can go and make this chart bigger. This is a native PowerPoint text box, so I can go and change the text. I can say Seattle Store Sales. And just like that, you've got your content in PowerPoint in less than a minute. Coming back here, just want to switch over to another browser. This was Chrome. This is Internet Explorer. I mean, if I didn't call it out, you might not have even noticed that we changed browsers. The rendering is so perfect across these different browsers. That's definitely a main reason for many customers to upgrade from previous versions of reporting services. Now, switching over to how we actually create some of this content, I'm just going to switch over here. Looks like this is prompting me again. This is Report Builder, the report design side of the experience in the report design application. And this is the Report Builder from the 2014 version that you're used to seeing. And here I have a few different visuals just to show the point of how much easier we've made it to create these modern looking visuals. This is what you would have gotten by default if I created a chart, gauge, bullet graph, or in this case map. And what I want to do is compare side by side what you're going to get by default today when you create the exact same type of visual. So switching over here, this is the modern overhauled, much more nicely designed version of Report Builder that you'll get in 2016. And right beside this, I'll just do insert a chart. I'll pick a pie chart just because that was the pie chart, the chart type that was selected here. And there you go. That's what you get from a pie chart by default right now. You'll notice that the color palette matches the one in Power BI, the design matches the one in Power BI, and overall it just looks like what you would expect from a modern looking pie chart in line with current minimalistic data visualization trends. The goal is to make really the data what pops out of the screen, and all of the metadata is kind of secondary to that, and any embellishments on the visual are really minimal and not getting in the way of presenting the data itself. Of course, as I said, you have very, very fine-grained control. If I pick one of these data series, for example, I have a whole bunch of properties here on the right that I can go and customize if you want to branch out from this. But the point is you get a nice modern visual a lot more quickly and easily than you did before. Here I'm going to insert a gauge. That was a semicircular north-facing gauge, so I'll pick the same thing. And again, especially in this case, it's really actually hard to imagine that the one on the left and the one on the right are actually the same visual, but they are, and that speaks to how much you can customize reporting services visuals. But the default you get looks just like the one in Power BI, and I think you can agree that it focuses on communicating the data in a lot more of a modern minimalistic view. This here is a bullet graph, although most people who are familiar with an actual bullet graph would agree that this is not a proper looking bullet graph. There's actually a spec for what a bullet graph should look like, and we've now followed that spec pretty religiously, and this is a bullet graph that you get today. You can, of course, create a color version if you want, but by default you get the standard 3 grayscale bullet graph. And this one that's a little puzzling is for some reason what you got from a map by default. It didn't seem to think that the world was an important part of a map to include by default for some reason. But now what you can do is you can click Map, Insert a Map, and just like that you get a map with a Bing Maps layer for you by default. And of course you can see the world, the different continents. We can zoom in to a country level or to a regional level, and you can start adding layers on top of your map, like if I scroll right here, tile layers, point layers, polygon layers, and so on based on spatial data. So, I mean, again, just scrolling through that, what's on the left is what you are used to with reporting services and what you got before, and what's on the right is these beautifully modern visualizations that you can create literally as quickly as I just created them here. So that's traditional reporting services paginated reports. Let's turn it over to Chris and see how to create a mobile report.
Thanks. All right, so with the mobile reports, there's a new tool that we've released called the SQL Server Mobile Report Publisher. There's been several previews of this over the last few months, and we should have the final version of this available later this week. That'll be what you use for the RTM release. This is, again, designed and based heavily on the Davidson technology that we acquired. If you were familiar with the Davidson technology, if you see Davidson Publisher, you can tell that this looks very, very familiar as we've ported over the vast majority of the features here, and the design experience is the same. And on the left, as I mentioned earlier, you have a number of different elements that you can choose from that would make up your mobile report. You have a series of charts, gauges, etc. And the design experience here is a little different. You don't have to do it this way, but we generally recommend folks actually lay out their entire report first and then hook up the data to it, which is a little different than the way people have traditionally built reports, where they start with the data first and then they put the visualizations on at the end. The reason I say that is because it gives you a very easy way to quickly mock this up as you're having a conversation with your stakeholders around what they'd like to see in this type of report. So here, if I drag over an element onto the canvas, I can quickly add it to the canvas, resize it, reshape it accordingly, and again, you see how it quickly adapts to the different signs that I potentially lay it out on the canvas. So I add a time navigator element. I'm going to add a couple gauges here, and then if I scroll down, I'm also going to add a map. So I'll add a map of the US. And you see it very quickly. I've laid out a version of my mobile report that I potentially would like to use for my final product. But what's nice about this is it's actually giving me some fake data behind the scenes. As I've added elements, it's automatically adjusted that fake data so I have a realistic experience when I go to preview it. You see here, if I go and I hit preview real quick, I can jump through the information and it strictly changes data so I can simulate exactly what that experience would look like, as opposed to just giving me some static images where I'm not getting a realistic representation of my report. And if I click to the data tab, you'll see there that's where it's giving you this simulated information. So if I go and I remove this map and say, oh, I don't really want this map, you'll see that it's also taken away that mock data as well. So it adds that for you on the fly, depending on which elements you choose to quickly create this mock-up for you. And in addition, you have the ability to lay it out, as I mentioned, for different form factors. So you see here you have master and then tablet and phone. Tablet and phone are very similar. One would be, if you think about you've turned a tablet to a portrait view, you would have a little bit more space than you have potentially on a smartphone. But if I go to my phone layout, you'll see I have the same elements I had previously, and I can relay this out accordingly for this particular form factor. And again, it's the same information that would potentially be behind the scenes here, and I can go through and just add my different elements and see what that experience would look like on a phone. And again, very easy to quickly see what your experience would look like on this type of device, and it's optimized for that type of experience. If you think about just how you use a phone in general, you generally don't use the phone the same way you'd use a PC in terms of you're using apps and you're tapping through them quickly. They're very short bursts in terms of sessions, as opposed to a longer-term session where you're working with a lot of information on a much larger screen. If I go back to my master layout and say, okay, I want to now add in my data, I can just go to the data tab, as I mentioned. I hit add data, and I have two options. I can bring in a local Excel if I'd like, and actually it becomes part of the file that you would then upload to the server, or I can connect to my reporting services instance, and you see here I've already set up that connection to reporting services, and again, I then have all these different data sets here that I could potentially use for my report. So I would bring this information in and hook up the data accordingly. I go in here to data sets, and I pick this particular set should work just fine. You see there, I now have my list of data, and I could simply choose the element that I want to reconnect my data to. So I would then choose my player's information, and then I could select the values accordingly from that. And it's very, very simple to move from your simulated data to your live data, make that connection, and then save it back up to your server. So that's a very brief overview of the mobile reports and how you can quickly get started with this. With that, I'll turn it back to Riccardo.
Great, thank you. Yep. So that's all we had for the demo, so we wanted to leave some time for questions, and I guess we're right on time to do that. So I'm going to switch back to my slides here. And just to wrap up, what we showed you today was how reporting services has been overhauled into this modern on-premises report deployment management solution. You've got the traditional paginated reports that have gotten a nice overhaul, and you've got the addition of these responsive mobile reports that I hope that demo just give you a flavor of how they're really the optimal experience on a phone in particular and on mobile devices. And then that new web portal that ties it all up, you can access everything when you're at your PC in one place in your browser, whatever browser you may be using. So with that, we have some calls to action for you. We encourage you to visit the SQL Server blog, the Data Platform Insider blog, where you can learn more about the roadmap that I mentioned at the beginning of this session. And then for the detailed features, you can follow the Reporting Services blog. That's where on a regular basis we announce all the new features that we're working on and that are coming out. Our sister blog, the Analysis Services blog, is a good place to find information on that related product. And then all of this stuff is available today, even in advance of June 1st, our GA date. You can go and get Release Candidate 3. The download link is there. I believe you'll get these links. And on June 1st, you'll have the generally available version available for you to install as a trial or as a licensed version. And with that, we'll hand it over, and I think Lewis is going to help us field some questions.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we have a ton of questions, maybe a little more than we can get through in 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes here. The first question is, great work on the visuals, which isn't really a question, but I figured you'd like to hear that after talking for 40 minutes.
Yes, not a question, but an awesome comment. Thank you.
Yes, appreciate it.
The second one, from the same person, I'll give him this. One of the issues I had with Power View in SP 2013 was that I could not control the color of lines and charts. Can I do this with Power BI mobile reporting?
So Power BI mobile reports is actually a very similar experience to Power View, where you have a theme that you would choose. You have out-of-the-box themes, and then, as I mentioned, you have the custom theme that you can apply to the portal, and there's also colors that you would do for the individual report. You have some level of flexibility there, but yes, it is very much like the Power View experience where you're applying one theme to the report, and then that's the level of control you'd have.
Okay, great. With the introduction of favorites in Web Portal, is there any reason to continue using the My Reports feature?
That's actually a great question. Those are there's a lot of confusion about what the My Reports feature is. The My Reports feature is an older feature that the purpose was to give every end user a place where they are guaranteed to have permission to be able to publish their own reports. So it's a sort of self-service scenario where maybe the environment, the reporting services environment, is controlled by IT. It's controlled in a way in which permissions trickle down, but they might not trickle down to me, and I might not be able to find somewhere in the folder hierarchy where I can actually just publish a report I've created. This gives you a guaranteed personal folder where you can go and publish your own reports. It's not a place really where you can have your favorites of reports that many other people created that are scattered across a bunch of other folders. So favorites is really for the masses, for the end users who, many of them, the majority of them, are not going to be creating reports. They're just consuming them, but they might be scattered in a few different places. They can now just tag their favorites that might be scattered in these different places and see them on one screen. But it's not really about publishing content. The content does live in a particular folder, and one of those folders for their own reports might be their My Reports folder.
Okay. Is there a roadmap item for the branding at the folder level like Davidson was for its hubs? Right now it's portal only?
Yeah, that's correct. We started with it being portal only, and I think the thinking was there's no fundamental opposition to having it being more granular. It's just Datazen did have that concept of hubs, and that doesn't really translate to reporting services today. It could be at a folder level, but that might be a little bit too complex for some customers. So we're really just looking for the customer feedback based on this first iteration of at what level of granularity do people want to manage brand packages.
Okay. Does the mobile report support multiple data sources in the same dashboard? Is it possible to have
Yes.
common filters?
So yes, you can, I think a good way to think about the mobile reports, so you can use the shared data sets concept from reporting services. You create, let's say you have a table of data you pull down from SQL Server, you have one from Oracle, you have one from an AS server. Once they get into mobile reports, a good way of thinking of it is like Excel using VLOOKUP. So you have this ability to have an element that will filter the other elements, and that selection list, you have an option in the mobile reports to basically hook it to the different data sets and visuals that you have in your report. So it doesn't matter where those different items are all coming from. You would have the ability to use them all in the same report and have this one experience for the end user.
Okay, cool. Next question. Will I have to recreate my existing Datazen reports, or are there migration tools available yet?
Yes, so this is a question that's come up more and more as the GA of SQL Server has gotten closer. In fact, there was just an email exchange I was having with the gentleman in Toronto who's leading this project. So what's going to be happening, there will be a migration tool available. It will be available sometime in June after the GA of SQL Server. This initial release he's now calling a preview release, with the GA of that coming shortly thereafter. The preview will obviously be publicly available for you to start moving content. I think they're really phrasing it that way because they won't have all of the functionality in there they potentially would like to have to make it as push-button experience as possible. But that's something that they are actively working on. I know that I just talked to the developers yesterday about this, and it's something we're still on track to have sometime in June with the first iteration.
Okay, you guys are answering quickly. We can probably get through a tenth of these that you have here. Parameters, can they function like Excel selection boxes where I can type to select quickly an item further in the list?
Yeah, we get this question a lot as well. With the parameters we chose in this release to tackle the #1 customer complaint about them was just the positioning of the parameters themselves within the pane. Obviously, we don't see that as the end of modernizing parameters, because the next thing people want is a list of many other things, but probably top of mind on that list would be the controls themselves to behave more like the controls that we're used to using in modern applications, which have things like me being able to type, autocomplete, auto suggestions, auto even spell correct, things like that. And I guess it's just a question of as we continue development beyond 2016, we're going to have more frequent releases of reporting services, continuing to improve parameters incrementally. I think that's one of the things that we want to do most. We even have some prototype stuff here floating around on the engineering of some of that stuff, typing in autocomplete. So it's just a question of when we'll be able to build something that's a nice cohesive feature that we can ship, but know that it's top of mind on our radar and something that we already have some early work on.
Sounds good. Are there any SSRS integration tools provided for web development? For example, MVC, Web Forms, Angular.
Yeah, so today what we have is we have a couple of things. We have a simple URL-based approach to embedding that maybe half the time is adequate for the customer scenario. So you just put an iframe in your application, you take the URL of your report from the web portal, you put it in this iframe, you add a little URL parameter, rs:\embed equals true, and it hides a lot of the web portal navigation in Chrome for you and just shows the report content with the report toolbar. You can hide the toolbar as well with another URL parameter if you want. There isn't a lot of JavaScript programmability in that case, but you get the basic embedding scenario. So that's without any bits in your application. You just have an iframe with a URL-based API. The thing that we have in addition to that is a report viewer control that is an ASP.NET Web Forms control. What we plan to do is we plan to do one more update of that ASP.NET Web Forms-based control to bring over the HTML5 renderer, the modern browser support, potentially the parameter positioning, and just bring it up to speed with Reporting Services 2016 functionality. But then at the same time, more people are using MVC. There is some interop between MVC and web forms, so there are cases where you can use that existing web forms control, but it's certainly not optimal for an MVC-based application. And then you have applications that are not based on ASP.NET at all. You mentioned Angular, other HTML5 frameworks, whether client-side or server-side. We want to build a control or a set of widgets or something, an SDK, if you will, that works across these different frameworks and isn't specific to ASP.NET. And that's something that we're looking at doing. We don't really have an immediate time frame for it yet, but it's something that we are already sort of starting to work on.
Awesome. The next question is, will there be the ability to upgrade existing reports to the new design?
Yes and no. So you'll be able to take existing reports, and if you reopen them in the new design tools, they will automatically upgrade to the new file format. If you just move your catalog over to a new server, they will also automatically upgrade to the new file format. Do be cautious with that, because once you upgrade the file, it can't really be downgraded again. So that means that people typically keep the old versions of the files around if they need to maintain older server environments. That may or may not be the case for depending on the customer scenario. We bias towards compatibility and not messing with your reports, which means the reports will look pretty much identical to how they looked before. To opt into the new design, what you can do is, as you open them in the designer, you can actually just insert a new chart and rebind the data. You don't have to do all the data prep again. But that is sort of an incremental thing that you do bit by bit in your reports. We don't have a wholesale put my report through this converter tool and make it look beautiful sort of thing. It's something that we were kicking around the idea as a, is this even feasible sort of investigation, sort of experimental project. But I guess there's an open question of how much customer demand there is for that, whether it would really make a lot of customers' lives easier and whether they would use it in bulk on their reports. And on our side, it's just something that's experimental, whether you really can do it and retain the layout and the sizing of all the elements in the report and still have it look good.
Awesome. Well, we are just about out of time. We still have several questions available. We'll give those to you after the presentation. You can go on to the next slide. Again, thank you to the sponsors, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Hortonworks, Redgate. Fantastic sponsors. If you don't know about any of the sponsors, you should find out about them. Coming up next, we have Rick Higas, a great friend of mine, talking about Column Store indexes. Second session of that today. I will have seen on that. A great new technology, so tune into that session. And you can go to the last slide. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Chris, Riccardo. Great session. Very much enjoyed it, even if I'm a SQL server. I'm sorry, a T-SQL kind of programmer. Is that excellent?
Thank you.
It's high praise.
I understood all of it. That's
That's the
idea. Yeah. Great to hear.